Wesley Crusher shows off his cartwheeling skills. Leotor gets all passive-aggressive. And Data realizes that he does tend to babble. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc, Lofton, and Denise Crosby.
Hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk. Today we're doing a review of The Next Generation Season 1, Episode 7, Justice, story by John D.F. Black and Worley Thorne, teleplay by Worley Thorne, directed by James L. Conway. This was November 9th, 1987. We have a very special guest. What a coincidence. It is director James L. Conway. How's it going, James?
Nice
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here again.
Great. Also, very quickly, this entire season was sponsored by our good friend Grandpa One, aka Tim Baum. So thank you to Tim. Let's talk about I had way too much fun watching this episode for the first time in like 25 years, and I kept thinking about Cirroc because I've showed you still frames from this episode for the last 4 years, and when you saw it, Cirroc was like, "This is the one."
I was like, "This is that episode with those outfits." Yeah, that was the first thing I thought of. But strangely, but judging just by off the photographs that you've shown me over the years, Ryan, of this still shots of these episodes, I thought it was going to be a lot worse than what it was. I thought I was in for like, oh God, this is going to be just so terribly dated and bad. But actually, I was pleasantly surprised by watching this episode. It was interesting and it was fun to watch, and it kept me engaged. And I feel a lot of gelling happening amongst the cast and just the feel for, the Starfleet feel. It's coming together for me right now.
Yes. So Jamie, can we ask you first and foremost, this was your first Star Trek. This was your directorial debut in Star Trek, right? It was.
At the time, I was directing MacGyver's, and when they were going to start doing Star Trek, they asked me to come and meet with Rick and with Gene and everybody there, which I did, and we all got along. So they signed me up to do 3 the first season. They had script problems throughout the first season, and as it turned out, there was a conflict. They had shut down because of some script problems, and they weren't ready when I was supposed to start prep on my second episode. So I only did 2. I did this episode, and then I did the season finale. But this was my first time, and it was, the show was still finding itself, and the actors were still finding out who the characters were. It was a dream of mine to do this show because I had watched the original series and loved it. And when I heard that they were rebooting Star Trek, I did everything I could to get on the show. So it was thrilling to be there. I have to say, I'm just looking at the picture behind you of the actors in their costumes. I was trying to remember if the actors were warned during the
auditions.
If they would be dressed like that. Because can you imagine having a body like some of these guys had and having to walk around looking like that?
Oh, I'm sure the casting was, tailored, knowing that, they're going to be just almost within an inch of their, their equipment. It's like...
running.
I think the better question would be: were we prepared? Were we told that you're going to come down to this planet and this is what everyone's wearing?
And what did you think when you first had that? When you first saw them in that wardrobe?
I mean, it was just, again, every time I would show up, I never knew what I was going to walk into, It was like my eyes went boing, boing, it's like.
So did Riker's.
Kidding me. You are kidding me. This is what, and they're running. Everywhere. I could barely keep a straight face. I was like, this is. We've gone to Plato's retreat, This is wild.
Did you know that you would be doing softcore on this episode, Mr. Conway?
I mean, I think the Naked Now gave me an introduction, where this was going. And how about? I mean, I'd forgotten totally about my reaction. Not only on the bridge was like, oh, they'll have sex at the drop of any hat.
That was hilarious.
You know, it was like,
yeah.
Tasha Yar's feeling frisky.
Yeah.
By episode 7, you know, she's ready to like, oh yeah, let's do this.
Yeah.
I watched the episode 2 days ago in preparation for this, and I was shocked at how stiff and formal the dialogue and the acting was, because it loosened up dramatically since, you know, over the years. And I think it was everyone just sort of trying to find what the universe of Star Trek was that first season. But everyone was so stiff and formal. And I know there was a rule that you couldn't change any dialogue. And it was very adhered to, especially that first season. Any changes had to be called in. I don't think the actors were wanting to change too much in the beginning. But it surprised me because it became much more colloquial as time went on, and much more the way people act now, but it was definitely stylized in that first season.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Jamie, I wanted to ask you about that actually. Like, you've gotten to see Star Trek evolve over, 17 or more years, from this episode through Enterprise and the Enterprise pilot, several episodes. And so you've seen this evolution, like you just mentioned, the stiffness kind of goes away. But do you remember the challenges of day one? Like, do you remember, were there script changes going back and forth? Were there discussion of, we want to keep it like the original series, but a little bit different? What can you remember that far back, and what the buzz was, what the challenges were on those first days?
What I remember is the script was way behind. And we had it, and everybody had a lot of problems with the script. And Gene kept promising he would do a rewrite. And literally the day before we were supposed to start shooting, he did a rewrite, but not much changed. Everyone was surprised about how little changed. So it was really the vision that Gene obviously had for this episode. This episode is really quintessential, the original series. I mean, it's so in that vein. But there was sort of script chaos that whole first season. And then the last episode I did, the season finale, there was a writer's strike. So there was a lot of changes that needed to be made, and none of the actual writers were able to do them because they were all on strike. So it became even more complicated. But anyway, to go back, I remember that one of the reasons they liked my work so much on this episode, which was my first one, is because I'm a very quick director, and I supplied them with lots of coverage. And everybody really appreciated all of the coverage that I did, and still moved the camera and had some style. And I have to say, I really had fun. It was the first time I ever got to direct somebody saying, when they beam me up, energize. The first time I had, I forget which actor to say energize was, but it gave me a thrill to have them say that. And also the other thing that evolved dramatically was the visual effects. This first season of TNG, when we did just a simple green screen, they had to bolt the camera to the ground and had to use a special camera that had 4 pins pulled down instead of 3 pins pulled down, because registration was so incredibly precise. So you were very, very restricted. Having said that, I forgot about the little glowing ball that comes up in front of Brent and that whole thing. And it looked good. I thought the effects held up really well.
Yeah. I thought quick, as a director's note, I thought what looked really good was when the ball first came in through the corridor and you had all the background extras reacting to it. And I found myself thinking, what did they use back in '87? Was it like a stick and a tennis ball? Or did you just, because I watched them 3 times, they were all extremely coordinated in how they watched where the ball was going. Do you remember that?
I don't remember, because it couldn't have been the stick and the ball, because you can't get rid of them like back then. Right. You could not get rid of it like now. I don't remember what they did, but everybody was looking at the proper place. Brent was looking the same place. Patrick was looking the right place. I was amazed at how, because that's often a giveaway of something that's not well done, because people are looking in all the wrong places. No, I don't know how we did it. I can't remember.
You must have marked it, look at that, just take them through. Everybody practice it a couple times and, hit those.
Yeah, we
marks.
used to put tape on the walls, things like that. So everyone would look in the same place.
Right. That's what I recall.
You also got some really good shots of the water treatment facility, the planet.
Yes.
I felt like I was really somewhere exotic, and you captured it well without revealing, city landscapes in the background or whatnot. What were the challenges there?
That location was amazing. That I actually, that's a Pulvita Basin, and I go there to take photos a lot because they have a couple of lakes there with a lot of birds, and it's very pretty. And I was just there about 3 weeks ago.
I live about a half a mile away from there, and Cirroc and I were just there last year. It's a good time.
I didn't realize that what it looked like until we scouted that location, and it was just so perfect with the fountains and that big 21st century looking building. It was a great location. And then the other half was shot at Huntington Libraries at the gardens there, which I belong to. I live in Pasadena, and it's just 10 minutes from me. And I go there all the time to walk. And I go back, walk by the spots where we shot. That's where he fell into the equipment and that whole sequence.
I wanted to ask that, because that was clearly not the Japanese garden there.
Yeah,
that was definitely not
the same thing.
Right. Yeah, that was there. And it was also rare for Star Trek to go out in the first place. I mean, that was a very stage-bound show.
Totally. I mean, I can't remember. I mean, that may be the only time I think I went out somewhere. I don't know. We'll see. This has been so much fun for me doing this little walk through my past with these guys, because I'm not remembering any of them, And so, but I it was like we were like kids in a candy store. We're outside. We're outside. We're not on the lot.
Fresh air, birds.
It'd be like going on a field trip, when you were in elementary school. You're out.
One of the fun things about seeing this first season is because I'm seeing all the actors in their wardrobe because of Picard, reprising themselves and how they look now. And it's so funny to see the difference between then and now. I mean, Jonathan Frakes, oh my God, he was just such a different looking man and actor than he is now. It's astounding.
Well, I look the same. I look exactly the same.
Hell yeah. Yeah. Hell yeah. Actually, on that Riker note, this was the first episode in which I noticed kind of what people had mentioned in the past, which was the Riker character was kind of modeled after Captain Kirk. And this was the first episode where I kind of saw that a little bit, because when he just kind of the way he would like leer a little bit, and when he hugged that lady, he actually he hugged her and he went, I was like, whoa, easy. And he and Worf were like chumming it up. This was exciting for them. But I saw a little Kirk in there. Do you remember
I saw that hug.
Yeah. I lit that.
It was it was like, this is mine.
Yeah. It was like,
Yeah. Well, I had always heard that, Riker was standing by if they were taking a risk with Patrick as the captain, that if that didn't fly for whatever reason, whether the fans didn't accept it, whether, the studio didn't get it, that, they were going to kill him and Riker was going to take over.
Oh, really?
I never heard that.
That was always, now, it could be one of those, urban legends. I don't know, but that it was so the casting of Jonathan was, had many layers to it. They wanted a number, his number one, but he also could have possibly been the next captain.
Wow, that makes sense.
I'll have to ask Rick about that. I'll ask Rick. I'd like to know. I'll report back.
Awesome.
Jamie, I want to ask.
Don't tell him I said it.
Throw it on me. Say some weird fan.
There's already some odd little tales that are roaming around.
Jamie, I want to ask you. You said that this was early on, and a lot of the characters hadn't been formed yet. What were some of the conversations you were having with the cast about their characters, or about how to approach different scenes? Do you recall any of those?
I don't. I don't know that there was. It's more like when a show is finding itself, the actors are who they are, which is different than what they originally were written as pilot. And so there's a dance that happens where the writers are hearing what the actors really sound like, and they start writing for them as they are, as opposed to just a hypothetical in a pilot. And it takes a season or so before that all melds together. And that was sort of where this was. It wasn't like they were searching for who they were as much as they were trying to get comfortable with the dialogue, and the writers were trying to get comfortable with who each of them was individually, so the dialogue could be, designed for them. So it was more like that. It just it was a show evolving, finding itself.
On that note, Jamie, whether you remember this from 35 years ago or whether you remember this from 2 days ago watching it, was there a character and actor that you felt had the best blend of having the writers having that character fleshed out and the writer or the actor being close to the character? Was there one that you felt was already kind of there?
Well, funny in terms of what we were just talking about, but Patrick always just seemed so comfortable. I mean, Patrick seemed like a captain, and he felt like he was in charge. I thought Jonathan was trying to find out who that character was. I think Michael was fine. I think Worf was Worf, and it grew and got better, but he was already sort of there. The other characters were pretty much who they were. None of them had a lot to do as individual characters, so it was hard to showcase anybody. But I thought Patrick was just always very comfortable as the captain. Do you agree, Denise?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was, I always felt that it was so easy as an actor to assume that kind of, this is the respect and that kind of authority that, one would have to create as an actor to kind of, but it was just inherent because he commanded that kind of energy on the set. He was quite serious, where a lot of times we were just ridiculously silly and goofy. He never engaged in that kind of behavior. We got called out on it a couple times, and he loosened up as the years have gone on. But, at that point, he was coming from, a English theater background, and things were done quite differently. And so he had already that kind of what you're talking about, that aura of control and command.
Right. The English accent really does add to that.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like, oh yeah, if he just gave you one. Plus, his tone as the captain is very serious. Sometimes he's very stern. Still, at this point, he'll answer somebody, whether it's Data, just get to the point, cut to the chase. I'm going to do it this way.
And stop babbling, Data.
Yeah,
yes.
He's still addressing, the crusher boy or boy. He calls him boy at some point. It sometimes I'm watching it and going, wow, he's tough.
And I will say, watching the show, that the dilemma was a classic Star Trek dilemma, where you might have to sacrifice this boy to fulfill the prime directive. I think that's one of the things that Gene held dear. He really wanted to make these hard choices that we would have to say, well, if it was me, what would I do? And that was one good piece of writing in that is
absolutely.
Dilemma.
I mean, that's a philosophical principle that's taught in school. I forget what it's called, but would you sacrifice one to save the lives of many?
Right. And they flatly asked that question in this episode, which was great. And this is another one that's super explored in the famous and infamous episode Tuvix on Voyager, Star Trek Voyager. But that was 2 for 1. He flatly said, would you save one life to risk, 1,000 or whatever it was? And it was really cool to see Star Trek saying that in episode 7 already.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The other concept they dealt with was the idea that an advanced species would appear as a god to another less advanced species. Kind of an interesting forward-thinking concept that wasn't really talked about much as far as just philosophizing about these kinds of things. But James, also I wanted to say that I felt like we just talked about Picard's character, and I felt like this was really his best performance so far, because he did balance the stern with the compassion, with the balancing. I felt him weighing out all of this stuff in his mind and his performance. And I really enjoyed his performance in this. When you're coming on early on in the show, what are some of the things that you're doing stylistically to make a decision like this is the kind of Star Trek style that I'm going to adhere to or create? What are some of those decisions like?
Well, one thing that I did, and my style has evolved over the years, but even back then I moved the camera a lot. And I think the first or second shot is a very low tracking shot underneath Patrick on the bridge, and just wraps around him like this. And it sort of set a tone for him being in control. There's a lot of handoffs where someone will start speaking and will start to cross, and that hands off to somebody else who then speaks. Try to keep the camera almost like a character on the bridge with everybody else. And I try to move the camera and do that kind of thing whenever possible, without sacrificing the coverage necessary or the close-ups that you need to tell the story properly. And there was a lot of good opportunities on Star Trek on this episode and throughout the years to do that kind of thing, especially on the bridge where you had a lot of people standing around talking. It was nice to be able to insert movement either by having them move or have the camera move, and to give it a lot of energy.
And you mentioned earlier about giving the studio and the producers a lot of coverage when you're doing your filming. How are you able to get a lot of coverage done in the same amount of time that other people are not? Do you print takes faster, or how do you do that?
It's like, I'm just better, whatever.
A lot of it is knowing exactly what I want. So if I'm happy, I'll say cut print over here instead of cut. Everybody gather, talk, and then they say, okay, what do you want to do? You can, I'm sure Denise has experienced this, where you hear cut and then nothing happens for 5 or 10 minutes, and you don't know if the scene is over or not, or what the next shot's going to be. I was never like that. It was cut print over here, cut print over here, and I prepared completely. I always sketched out every set, all the blocking, and I always knew exactly the shots that I wanted to have for that day. And it would be, exactly, all the camera moves were all pre-planned. If the actors had a different idea, I would adjust to what they wanted to do. But as a rule, I knew exactly what to do. So it would go cut print over here, cut print over there. And I was the pilot is 1 and 2. So episode 3, I was only the fifth director. So the directors they may have had before me may not have been as efficient or not have given them as much coverage. So when they saw all the coverage I gave, they were thrilled, because I guess they hadn't gotten up until that point. So it's a combination of my style, and I think maybe Ed, the DP, was getting a little bit quicker, though he never got very quick. So it worked to my advantage. And I loved the show, and I was energized throughout, and so it all worked out really well.
Wow.
Well, James, we only have a couple minutes left with you here, but were there some things upon viewing this? I wasn't sure if you're going to watch it before coming on, so that's really cool that you did. Was there anything that you thought, I wish I had done this, or not so much in hindsight, but you could put yourself back then saying, I wanted to do this, but we're out of time, or we didn't have the budget for this? And were there some things that maybe you saw a couple of days ago that you thought, damn, that's pretty good. I forgot I did that. That was good.
Actually, some of the camera moves I had forgotten about. I forgot about a lot of it when I watched it. But there was nothing I watched and said, "Oh, I wish I hadn't done that." I didn't see any of that. The only thing was stylistically, in terms of performance, I wish it had been much looser. And I'm sure it was just the way the show was. When you are rewatching these episodes, I'd be curious to know when it loosens up, because it certainly wasn't like that when I came. It may not have been like that by the last episode of this season, but it just seemed almost like there was stage acting to some degree. The voices were a little louder than they should have been, and it was all a little bit stiffer than you would expect. And I'm not sure when that went away. Denise, you'll notice certainly when you watch the episode. Did you sense that during the season as it developed?
Yes, I mean, I think. For me, it's so unique because I came back periodically. I came back in season 3. I came back in season 4. So for me, I could monitor the temperament and the tone that was going on. At this point, I feel like we're just thrown out there without caution, and going, you guys got to figure this out. You got to figure out what this phaser does, how you hold it, you push on
tiny
it,
little tic tac of a phaser.
Small.
Yeah,
they're like, I was like, what the hell? It doesn't even look menacing. It doesn't even put fear in somebody. Put that down. Like,
wait a minute. But the whole time I was running with that big one on my hip. Yeah. Remember? Like, where did it go? Where did that phaser go? So I've got the little guy now.
That's flair.
I also think what was happening is the actors were taking their cue off of Patrick, because Patrick was English and his character was a little bigger than life and a little more formal than theirs. I think subconsciously they sort of got trapped in there, and then that went away.
Well, and again, you're in an environment that is pure science fiction fantasy. So you're trying to figure out how is this real? Right. And what happens, you're right, people with that British accent, I would see it all the time. People would just suddenly fall into this kind of Shakespearean quality. A lot of guest stars that would happen to. It would be this odd kind of a Shakespearean speak they would go into, instead of how does the engineer speak? How does the person who cleans the ship, who are these people? And it's so it was a little outside of the norm. It shouldn't have been. We should have all gotten reminded or reconnected that no, we're people just like the guy is at the bank right now, or slinging coffee at Starbucks. These are real people doing real jobs.
Right. And acting, TV and acting styles have changed dramatically since the mid 80s. Sure. But for example, now and for the last 20 years, there's a read through of the entire script before you ever start shooting. And
that's right.
And that makes a huge difference, because you're all in the same room with all the writers, the producers, executive producer, and you're reading the script. And if you can voice these kinds of things, you can find the universe, you can find the comfort zone for what the show should be. And I think it was very different then. And it was also strange. I don't know, it was a syndicated show. Nobody was quite sure where it was going to be on and what are we doing here. And they were just literally trying to find out what this show was.
Absolutely, 100%. Do you remember, though, in the first season, we did do table reads?
Oh, I don't remember that.
You don't? Yeah, it only happened in the first season. I was telling these guys about it. Gene would be there, Rick, the director, and all of us. And we'd go page by page. Sandwiches would be brought into some, little ante room in the writers' building. And we'd go through it. That was completely abandoned, when I came back to the third season. I said, "Don't you guys do table reads anymore?" And they said, "Oh, no, we didn't. We stopped doing those."
They're very valuable. Producers tend to not like them when the actors start complaining about the dialogue. That may have happened. So they're
like, "No more. Yeah. That's it. Well, no more table. No more croissants."
Yeah. I'm sure that's how that went. Yeah.
I just love hearing you guys say, "Oh, Gene and Rick," like, "Oh, no big," Gene was there, Rick, and we're like, "What? Gene Roddenberry?" Rick, this is crazy. But this has been so much fun, Jamie. We really appreciate you taking the time and talking with us, and we hope it's not going to be another year and a half before the next time you're on the show, because your next episode's in just a few months. So, but thank you. We really liked it.
See everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Everybody stick around. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule.